tonight we are live streaming and we are going to try to follow the election night as close as possible for the three first hours. And the reason why I chose the first 3 hours because it's quite late where I live. It's 12 a.m. So I want to sleep as well, and we will try to end this roughly when it's here at 3 a.m. So we might be four people tonight, so it might be chaotic. Me, who knows? We'll see where it goes. And because it's election night, it's not just a normal live stream. I suited it up, of course, because I want to feel as professional and as possible. And our first guest for tonight, and he will join us throughout the live stream. As much may come and go as throughout the night. Is Thomas Mackie, who is no stranger to this podcast. Hello, Thomas. And my first question to you is because I want to, if you wouldn't mind keep talking a little bit, I want to try to share the live stream right now. So while I'm sharing the live stream, what did you talk about? What are your expectations of this year's election?
Might want to make sure your microphone's up higher.
So yeah. What are your expectations of tonight's election? If you
okay, well,
now?
For me, it's an interesting one because when Biden stepped aside and then promoted the VP to take on, there was kind of a bit of a shock, although a relief in some ways too. But the last month has been very intensive. Not of course, American elections are always a bit of a clown show. It's a constant. It's not unusual. We have this. It's kind of a thing we do. But what's neat is that we have large numbers, and so some of the commentators have already come up in this one. The women voting, all ages, has skyrocketed. The particular pushes to get women to not vote with their husbands was an interesting one, because it reaches out to the very conservative, saying, look, this is not conservative. I mean, I've heard Dr. Heather Cox Richardson often say this is not the Republican Party anymore. This is now a cult. It has fallen on hard times. It's not conservative. It's, I mean, any nation that has a democratic process has got to have more than one party. In fact, two is dangerous. But we've never been able to manage more than two effective parties. Because it's not a parliament, it's a Congress. It's winner take all. So there's no, we've never had any other ability to manage this one. I'm thinking that this election is going to start making more folks rethink what they, how we should manage this. The Electoral College is so archaic. It's a dinosaur, and it hasn't. And some said it's not really worked since 1800. So it's a problem child, and it is definitely non-representative since 1929. Congress stopped representatives. The size of the House was capped in 1929, and so more and more people are lumped into one congressional district, which means your rural congressmen get far more influence than what they deserved. They don't. I mean, you have huge numbers of urban people who have basically they're kind of mushed into large districts. So it doesn't. It's not working. We probably need to go a little more toward a one person, one vote, or ranked choice voting, perhaps, as a better way of managing the elections. We're still too tied to the 18th century format, which is working very well for the Republicans, but it does not. You lose a lot of people. So the election, I think, is going to start more and more people thinking we're going to have to change that system. It won't be an easy change, though. I mean, and the election is not over. I mean, this even if Trump loses,
if I may interfere, how do you think is the best way? You said it won't be easy, but how do you think would be the best way to change the political system? And should we keep the electoral college
as well.
Yeah, the best. Well, I'll have you ask 4 people and you get 12 answers, um, because because it's inbred in us. But I think um, to expand getting rid of the electoral college would require a massive shift um, in thinking, and it would also require a constitutional amendment, which are really deliberately made complex to do. It would be easier to expand the size of the electoral college to actually represent um, what it should be if it had kept pace all since 1929. You would then have a larger number of delegates allocated to your urban areas that are right now kind of lump. That Wyoming, for example, could barely make it as a state. If we started all over again, the states that had that certain percent, like Wyoming, North Dakota, they would barely make it as a state. Um, Washington D.C. has more people than some of those states have, so there's a distinctive problem here, and it is very partisan in battle. I've watched my own views have changed a lot on this one, but yeah, I think expanding the electoral college would be the first step, and then maybe perhaps ranked choice voting. It would give the parties a lot more chance to not get stuck with a candidate no one really wants, but you're stuck with them. A lot of Republicans do not want Trump, but they're stuck with him because the party has been absorbed into that what we now call the MAGA. It's just been sucked in. So if the election goes Democrat strongly, hopefully it'll be a starting point, but it'll by no means be an end. This is going to go on for a while.
How would you feel? How would one because the United States has most of the time, maybe not early on in this electoral history, and we will have another guest on very soon as well. We might be 4 people here tonight, so but it's early on, of course, there were not the Democrats and Republicans as we know them today, but most of the electoral history, we always had 2 parties in the United States. So
Mhm.
how would you introduce, if you were to introduce a multiple party system like a lot of the
Oh,
European countries have? How would you go on about doing that? I mean, we technically have 3 now, right?
yeah.
With the
Well,
libertarians, who really no
yeah.
one takes
Yeah. We
seriously,
yeah.
but
Well,
we
actually, we
have the
have
Republicans and
probably
Democrats. So
yeah.
how would you go on about introducing a multi-party system in the United States
You would
of
have
America?
to ham. You would have to ham. Oh boy. So the last time we actually, the parties are being realigned right now as we speak. Right now, people voting Democrat are going to include, and I heard this from someone else, the Cheney family, Lynn and her dad, the extreme conservatives, the Cheney family and the Bushes, all the way to Bernie Sanders. You know, one party can't contain all that, but
Yeah.
that's because it's basically a little like the early Whig Party. Everybody who hated Andrew Jackson joined the Whigs. And that's kind of what we have right now. That can't hold up real long. But we've never been able to sustain a third or fourth party any length of time. Back in the 1850s, the Know Nothings came close, or they called the American Party. They
That's
came
not the party
close.
Donald Trump should join.
Yeah, well, that has been common. That's more than a few comments. In fact, my students picked that up. When I posted the American Party platform from 1850, one of my students just yelled out, "It's the Republicans!" I go, and I'm trying to keep it nonpartisan. And go, "Oh, there goes that. There goes that. Whoop, there goes." But you would have, oh boy. See, right now we have the Green Party, Libertarian. There's a Socialist Party, but they're tiny. Um, there is also the American Solidarity Party, which is actually I should join that one myself, but it contains a lot of the Catholic Christians, um, but they're too weak to actually form any kind of a political powerhouse. They don't have any skilled politicians really that I've seen in it, so you don't really have that yet. And all of it, it's just because so they call themselves independents, what they all end up doing, which is not something our early, when you go back to the Whig Democrat divide, and then the Republican Democrat divide of the 1860s. Um, that they didn't think about. They couldn't conceive of third party simply because um, just how the way we vote. It has never been able to hold on. You need them in order to force the other parties to compromise. If you had just enough congressmen, if you had just the members of Congress who are from independent parties, that you have to negotiate a little more outside the stream, outside the wings. See, but right now the Democrats are containing, almost an overload of parties, mostly because they just realized that there was a true danger to the democratic structure. And in fact, a lot of we've gone to great lengths to try and convince the independents and those who, it shocked me that people who didn't know this. I said, dude, you thought Donald Trump was a good businessman? What have you been listening to? And I realized because of our segregated newscasting that we just don't have it. I subscribe to like 12 different subscriptions in order to try and figure out what's going on, including oodles of podcasters formed from former journalists who decide, oh, I've had enough of CNN or I've had enough of Fox, and I'm joining. You can do it now. So it's a whole new world of that one since Obama's time, and using the social media as a whole other ballgame. And now it's just that's basically where everything's at in social media. But it's extremely partisan. It's chopped up in little tiny bites.
I want we don't do this just more when our other guest comes
Yeah.
on. I want to discuss this election more closely, but let's discuss for a second. What do you think international perceptions are of this year's election?
Exhausted. I was just watching several news, and one of the things, in fact, oh goodness, one group I follow, they are both historians, ministers, and podcasters of various sorts, scholars. I think all about 4 or 5 different PhDs in different areas kind of call themselves the Convocation Unscripted. I belong to several other podcasts. I simply started joining up because they were specialists in this area, and they had these random things. And the exhaustion, it's not unusual. When we get to November 1st, or even before November 1st, the word you get is you're so sick. I mean, my email has packed out with one more Democrat request for funding. I've already donated 4 times. I said, I'm not doing it again. Come on, leave me alone. And I'm a fan. But the problem is that
Have you gotten any emails like this from the Republican Party?
Oh, what's that? I do some. Once in a great while. I'm not sure how I got it, but I've had a few Trump ads and notices come in, and I laugh and chuckle. Boy, did you get the wrong guy this time? But and I think it's because if your name shows up in a, because 30 some years ago, I was a card-carrying Republican. I was in a Little Brittle County in Virginia. I was on a Republican committee. I was never I had no authority or space, but I was there. I mean, I had my name there, but it was simply the way I grew up. Bit by bit, I became more soured with the policies, or at least not impressed with policies. And even before Trump came on board, by the time I saw the Tea Party, that was kind of like, oh my gosh, these guys are out of their minds entirely. I knew they were disturbing, but by the time I see the Tea Party, I go, oh my goodness, okay, Mackie, wake up, smell the smell the coffee, because you can't do this. You really have to be far away from this. You cannot be associated with this anymore. And so by that time, not because I've been independent, but by that time I'm running away from them at great speed. Oh no. And then when Trump first ran, I thought it was a joke. I was thinking back to 1968 when Pat Paulson ran against Nixon, And he was a comedian, and his shtick was the deadpan, absolutely no emotion in his voice type of delivery, his monologue. It was very funny, but you had to catch the jokes because there was no cueing at all. And so I thought it was a joke, and said, "Oh, he's real." Oh no! I thought, "Oh, this can't be." And my wife had thought for years, or for months, she said, "Well, that's not a problem because as soon as Trump has to fight the Senate, the Senate will stop him." Wrong. They buckled. They buckled. They absolutely buckled. And that's what I had not seen before. Is in he was obviously in the and they buckled with him. That was just not right. They didn't do their job.
I want to take a look at the Republican Party before Donald Trump, and of course, take a look at the elections and how politics were. And it's almost hard to believe now because it's crazy to think we almost had 10 years with Donald Trump. But because it will be 10 years, I think, next year,
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure. So it's crazy to think that there'll be an era without Donald Trump in our minds. But that's, I must confess, I'm not very familiar with, and I wasn't that political. I was young and innocent back then in 2008 election. But let's take a look at the 2008 election and take a look at how the different politics were presented. And I saw a clip from this a while ago. It was so civil. It was unreal to think about how politics actually it wasn't just two people making fun or bullying each other. It was actually you could almost respect both parties at this point in time. So let's take a little bit look at the 2008 election and see how. What are your thoughts on the Trump? I think it was Mitt Romney. I think if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney. Yeah, let's talk about some of the debates and compare the Mitt Romney and Obama debate versus Trump and say Hillary Clinton. Sorry, her name escaped me for a few seconds. But let's take a look at the Trump and Mitt Romney election versus the Hillary Clinton, say, and Donald Trump election, and compare those two.
Okay, you're asking me to compare.
Yeah.
Okay, Mitt Romney, Clinton.
Sorry, Mitt Romney and Obama. Yeah, Mitt Romney and the Obama.
I really have trouble hearing you here.
Sorry.
I really have trouble hearing you.
Oh yeah. Do you hear me better now, though?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about how the difference between and how much more civil the Obama and Mitt Romney debates were versus the Clinton and Trump debate were.
Okay. On that category, we have always had American politics again can be a little funny. There's years ago a book came out called Political Humor, and it was 19th century. And to be a good politician like Abraham Lincoln was, you had to be able to verbally spar, and it usually involved a bit of humor. Very basically, to be a good politician, you almost needed to be able to do stand-up comedy. You almost literally had to have that kind of skill. I believe you do stand-up comic sometime. Right? Yeah.
Before, yeah.
Well, and the skill that you use to read an audience and respond to a heckler, that is what traditionally an American politician had to do, especially in local elections. Our national elections, up until really the late 19th century, the presidential candidates did not do speaking. It was done by their handlers. The party did it. I just finished a book about here it is, The Wide Awakes, by John Greenspan. This is a neat book. It's about the 1860 election, and it is heavily influenced by young guys in their teens and 20s who dress up in raincoats and torches, and they do loud and they're very loud, very they dominate the streets. They control the street to run the election, to get people out to vote, to push that and to keep pushing it. And they would also provide muscle for candidates or for speakers who were threatened with bullying in areas that had a large Southern population. And so they became actually almost like a flashpoint in 1860. Many Southerners fearing that they were actually an army that were going to invade them. So, so we've had this before. 1850s, in fact, several historians like Dr. Heather Cox Richardson has compared this to the 1850s. It's not, but it's rhyming, but it's a real close rhyme. A lot of the chaos, a lot of these, the edginess about an illiberal minority that want to control the government. They want to manage democracy for them, but not for the majority. They want most people to stay away because you're not really good enough to manage this. And it's called the illiberal democracy, which is what we've got right now of people trying to do that. And that's what's new. And now Trump didn't invent it; he brought it in. But so in the earlier campaigns, we mentioned earlier, like Obama, Mitt Romney, or Bush and Gore, there was a little more of an expected pattern of exchange. Although they did dirty things, Bush they would usually, the day, a couple of days before election, they would throw some kind of random, absolutely off the wall, dirty little trick. Nixon was known for this. They would, it was too soon to the election before you could manage it. The issue with the FBI and Hillary Clinton, that there was some, okay, what's going on here? You could have wondering on that one. So those are dirty tricks. So that's not unusual, but the level of copious lying, just throwing anything out there, not to make you believe it, but to make it confusing that you can't or you will not believe anything anymore. The idea behind what Trump does is not to convince us of something is true, but to convince us that nothing is true and it doesn't matter. That's when because this is where specialists and authoritarians says this is where you get the dictator comes in. You have the strong man who then, I control everything. You simply, my word is truth. You don't need anything else. My word is truth.
I want to talk a little bit about election during, and I know this isn't really your area, but I want to talk a little bit about elections during the Cold War. And because there's a lot riding on this election right now, and I feel like the Cold War kind of can be relating to this election because a lot riding on the next president during the Cold War as well, because you never knew what would happen if he or she became the next president of the United States during the Cold War. What would happen with this topic? But we see tonight a lot is riding on tonight and the next few days of, say, will democracy preserve as people think? And I'm likely to be an optimist. I hope they're wrong. I hope that even if Trump is elected, I hope there will be still a democracy there. But that remains to be seen. Most people will seem to disagree. But let's talk a little bit about it's not the idea of preserving democracy I want to talk about, but has there been elections as important as tonight before?
Okay. Repeat the question again.
Where everything riding on, say, the Democrats would win, or if the Republican win, it would be, either way, has there been such an important election as tonight before in the U.S. history?
Again, because of our the popular election, the culture of it, we tend to use language like this consistently, which is like crying wolf all the time. This is the most important election. This has been very common with the evangelical Christian world to use that language. If we don't win this election, we'll get the world is coming to an end. Go back even 1800, the election between John Adams and
No,
Jefferson.
to be fair, there were no nuclear weapons back in the 1800s, so
Yeah, well, they use the same kind of language. They use this excessive. Wait, oh, come on, stop it. You know, and it's because it's just the very nature of our electoral process. But the last several elections are starting to look a little more really threatening because you're seeing large groups who are planning. Okay, when we get elected, then like the project, the 2015 project, or the 2025 project. Um, the idea there, okay, you fire basically just about everybody you can get rid of, all your permanent employees, and you bring in people who will simply do what they're told to do. They're not specialists. They have no competency necessarily in this, but they will do what the executive branch says to do. Now, to actually get away with it, it's going to be tough. However, you know, believe somebody when they say this is what they're going to try and do. It's not over because even if Trump wins, he's going to have to still going to go through that. The mass deportations are going to cause chaos beyond belief. But that would give our international rivals a lot of leeway because we're going to be completely bogged down in that chaos. The U.S., could literally be bogged down and not be able to do anything.
Do you think if such extreme measures and the consequences of such measures might get the sanctions against the United States? Do you think that's possible that countries will sanction the United States if Trump is really going extreme? Or do you think it will be he will actually get, like we talked about this before on in private, where he
Yeah.
will get right-wing governments that is on his side? But do you think if he before this we see before if say before he does this, do you think there will be sanctions against this? Never happened before as far as I know, but do you think there's a possibility if he gets out of hand that there might be sanctions against
There's
the
hard to
United
say
States?
any number of things because the radical right, it's not conservative, the radical right, they're finding their heroes in other authoritarian governments. Hungary's a dictator, Putin. These are people that all of a sudden they're
is
being
Hungary's
admired.
dictator.
Right, they're being admired. They're and been invited to the CPAC speeches. So all of a sudden we're seeing this. This is not even remotely normal, and so it's not Trump. Trump is simply the puppet. He is. There are more behind him. There are more others that are radicals that use Trump. Trump is glad to do this. He gets power. He gets whatever he wants, and these other the Bannons, the Millers, and the Heritage Foundation, they get power, and they can start to, their dream, whether or not they can do it, their dream is to remake the United States into an illiberal democracy, where you have a very limited oligarchy managing the government over the large majority who don't have a say. It's like going back to the mudsills again. You have a lot of people who should not talk much. And it's kind of religious based.
So in other words, it might grow to be like, say, ancient Greek, where only the rich could vote, and where it wasn't really. Let's face it, it wasn't really a democracy in the modern sense in Greece, because only the rich could vote. So would it kind of be like you foresee that would be like kind of a Greek democracy in a sense? Not
Yeah,
that that's a good thing.
yeah. This is it's not real. It's a one party state. It's a that's the kind of thing you're after. Now we've always had this danger. Um, we've always had a portion of our society who has been hostile toward democratic norms. Years ago, we had the old Democrat Party that was taken over by the slave powers, and then Jim Crow. So you had portions of this in the past. The parties, as major elections go change over, the parties realign and they shift again. And he said, we're looking. We have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, and the shift is going to be quite dramatic. We'll just kind of wonder what's going to happen, after that one. Now I just got a message from Woody, by the way.
Yeah.
He's coming in at 7:15.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
So the polls closes at 7, right?
Yeah. We
So
start getting
how soon do you think we get the first results in?
it's hard to
From
say.
what states do you think we
Okay,
will
won't
see
be
the
Pennsylvania.
first states?
Well, when I read earlier, let's see. When I read earlier, Michigan will probably, because a lot of the early voting went through pretty good. Let's see.
I just want to say I'm sorry if I look. I try to look. I'm looking. I have a screen. I have CNN over here, so if I look this way, I'm just looking at CNN.
Yeah, figure that. Yeah, let's see. Times.
Their commentary, by the way. So I'm paying attention. It's just that I want to try to take a look at the CNN's show.
I don't want to have too much
well, so I do pay attention.
Yeah, nothing coming in yet. Yeah, they can't do anything. And he said this is going to be a long, basically overnight and all this. It'll be just going to read through this here. So this is going to be let's see. Even getting started is going to be late for you.
While we're waiting for Woody, I might bring this up again later as well. I might upload this to Spotify as well for those as a bonus episode for those who missed the live stream. So, but I want to discuss because this has been kind of going viral in social media recently, and I think you know what I'm talking about. And that is the Iowa poll. So in Iowa, I think it was 47% for Harris and 44% for Trump. So let's discuss why has this Iowa poll? What makes Iowa so important, and why has this one, just this poll and not other states, gone viral for a non-American as myself? What makes the Iowa poll, and how accurate do you think the Iowa poll is?
Well, those two I states, Idaho and Iowa, are extremely red. And to see a very red state showing a very strong Democrat turnout from women, particularly, that means it's going to cut into their lead that they assume they're going to have. So the assumption is that they'll win it, but if all of a sudden we're seeing the early voting showing up that it's so even we don't expect it to go blue at all. However, if you start noticing that that state is becoming purple, it no longer has a very clear red majority, that it's a lot more dodgy now, then that's that'll cut into the years from now. Because like I said, I think a lot of the commentators, historians have been said this is not the end. This is it's a battle to stop a takeover. Several historians have said they expect to have violence somewhere along the line here between now and inauguration. Let's see, anything else coming in here? So I'm kind of watching 2 or 3 things at one time.
That's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. These are yours. Yep. So we're not gonna see you. It's gonna start kind of early. Yeah, I'm kind of curious how Europeans and other parts of the world, look at American politics. I remember my relatives, big in Scotland, they were interested in it, but it was kind of a puzzle to them. They kind of look at this. They kind of wonder, how does that work? I said, not always.
So I can't speak for the general public. I don't think. No. To be honest, this year has been a long one, to put it that way. And I think it started with the Biden-Trump debate when was this, March, I think?
Yeah.
Or I don't remember when the Biden-Trump debate.
It was the summer.
It was the summer, yeah. So when that started, and of course Biden wasn't that popular with the Israel-Palestine conflict and the support to Israel, and it's
that was a big part of why many people chose to vote for Trump, right?
Yeah.
Because many people, and of course,
Yeah.
we know
Well, yeah,
it's not
because
gonna get better when Trump wins. It's gonna get worse for
oh no,
Palestinians,
yeah,
and we know that
it's hard to
he,
grasp.
yeah, we know
Yeah,
that Trump won't do anything different than what the
no.
Biden administration have done in
Yeah,
the past 4 years, if not more, for Israel. But
yeah, yeah,
that has been a lot of an issue, and for Biden's popularity as well. So it's when the debate again, and going back to when the debate began, and you see that Biden was losing popularity because of the Israel-Palestine
yeah, yeah,
conflict in America and international popularity as well. And I don't think again, I don't think there
mhm,
would be any difference with Harris or Trump either way. But it's when we saw how Biden was struggling in that debate in the first presidential debate, I was losing hope. I was for sure that Trump would win if this
yeah,
kept going, and it
yeah.
was uncertainty as well. Would Biden step down? Would it continue? Because he was reluctant at stepping down at first in the in and when he finally realized, that and it's time for me to step down. And it's I hope, and I'm not a praying person by any means. I'm not very religious, but I hope and I pray. I'm gonna use that term now. That America is ready for a female, a first female, and a colored
Yeah,
female at that
it,
president of the United
way
States.
way past due on that one. Um, there is a
But to your question again, it's I think most people this year, and I think a lot of Americans agree as well, that I think most people view at this point in time the American election kind of as a joke at this point. It's a circus. That's especially with
yeah,
Trump's name calling and how he brags about having full rallies. When we see that clearly there are so many people that are bored and that actually walk out of his rallies. It's a circus, to put it that way, as
yeah.
many people I think say. And I don't. Well, it's scary that someone like that might be able to have the hold of the nuclear weapons, and
Oh,
not
that's terrifying.
insane. And
Yeah,
even Ted Cruz would be a better option than Trump. I think, but it's
not by
just
much.
ludicrous to watch American politics, and you can't get away from it either as a European, because so much relies on this with the Ukraine war,
Yeah,
and again, to bring up the Ukraine war to many people who are anti. I understand you want peace. I do want peace. I
yeah,
want Russia to stop invading other countries, and I want you know the Ukraine war and the Palestinian war to end. But I'm going to highlight the Ukrainian war just for 1 second, because I want to explain some things here that people may not really understand, and I want to do a comparison, because a lot of people complain, oh, Zelensky is just a puppet of the West. Oh, Zelensky just borrowing money and money and time again, and oh, it just goes to his wife and not the army, and that's ludicrous. Okay, so because let's actually look at Ukraine. It's a poor country that's
yeah,
just about a decade, 3 decades ago, got loose from the Soviet Union, a union they didn't even want to be with. They want to be a part of the West, and that Putin cannot stand. But they're not a rich country. They don't have the oil that Norway or United States has. They call the breadbasket of Europe
yeah.
for a reason, and that is why
They're a
Trump.
farm country.
Sorry, not Trump, but Putin want Ukraine, and this. But the reason, okay, I'm going to look back at World War II. So the United Kingdom at the time, the British Empire, had 1/5 of the world's they owned 1/5 of the world at the time by 1940, and by 1945 there were trillions in debt to the
Mhm.
United States, to India, to
Yeah,
several other countries.
yeah,
And you know when the, when a country that owes half the 1/5 of the world cannot even are trillions, and that's how they expect Ukraine to function against a juggernaut like Russia. And I kept saying this time and time again. They are a poor country, and they have to borrow They are in debt. There will be billions in debt by the end of this war, and it's these loans. Keep in mind, I'm saying loans, and both of these again, both this and with loans to Zelensky and to Israel has been major political teams during the Biden administration as well that I think made them. And sorry for a long explanation right now, but it's been major teams that has kind of diminished the Biden and the Democrat administration popularity, I think, and people look at. I think why people want Trump is because they say, "Oh, I'm a man of peace. I will end the Ukraine war. I will end the Palestinian war in just day one of my election." And of course, they won't do this, and we know the result because there's made. We not have looked at the global scale if Putin
Yeah.
get Ukraine, but it's a reason why we loan Ukraine this money, and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not going to bring up Israel at this point, but it's. I think the loans to all these wars that goes on is part of why the Democrats has lost its popularity the past 4 years. And I want to hear what you think about this.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for a long explanation, but I just
It's a
had
bit of
to
a no.
kind
Yeah.
of,
Well,
no,
this was a bit of a no-win scenario. The Israel was the ally, Cold War ally throughout that entire period. And the only decent ally, the only militarily stable ally U.S. had in that part of the world, and so the U.S. depended on Israeli intelligence, in a kind of basically of an anchor point in that area against Soviet Union incursions. Uh, the problem is, like I said, is our politics with Israel are linked into a bad theology. Not just bad politics, but a bad theology.
and
America
it's
has
even
always
more it's even more ironic. And a friend of mine told me this, who has have lived in Israel, is that a lot of Israelites are anti-Americans, which I find even more ironic.
yeah, it's interesting. A lot. Well, I think because they don't want us supporting a conservative government, which is breaking down the two-state process. We're not helping. I mean, Trump moved the embassy into Jerusalem. That was not supposed to happen. We're supposed to stay in Tel Aviv. We're supposed to, help encourage the two-state peace accord, going back to Carter's time. And the
If you
problem is,
don't mind talking, I'm just gonna go real quick to the bathroom, and I'll be right back. If you don't mind, just keep talking.
commercial break.
I'll join you in a second.
Yep.
Yeah.
Commercial break. If no one else is watching.
Yeah. So Wood should be with us in 15 minutes, I think. So.
Yeah. 20. He might.
So what are your thoughts? I just we don't keep talking politics. What have your perception been of I want to begin with the Republicans right now. So what are your thoughts on the Republican presentation of during this election?
The Republicans have ceased to be an effective party. They're no longer as a national party. They are not effective. They don't. As other historians have said, they don't behave as a party. They're not holding policies. They're not working out an expansion of their voting base. They're not doing anything normal. Our normal political parties have done.
We have a comment, if I may interfere. The Pamela, she says that, so I just read the exit polls are showing democracy and not the economy is the key issue of this
Yes,
election. So
I
what do you think about this?
that is true. I mean, I talked to a young gentleman yesterday at church. He thought the economy. I said the economy is actually doing surprisingly well right now, considering what we've been through. No, in fact, the historians. I've said it myself. My colleagues have said it, and I've seen quite a number of. In fact, the Democrats are saying it themselves. They are saying, "No, this is a." I'm trying to think of a term for this, but yeah, it's the weight is on. Are we gonna maintain an actual democracy? Are we gonna actually try and heal this? But uh, you know, we're gonna have to have basically you cannot have one select group of people be your actual man. Be devoted. You cannot have an oligarchy. When you look at the Heritage Foundation projects, those projects are all very much illiberal. They're looking to make sure that these are
You
not
are
going to be.
breaking up a
I'm
little
trying to
bit,
reconnect.
so just
Yep,
so you're
I
aware.
see it.
So something that I haven't really noticed in the last two elections is the vice president, and I haven't really noticed. So we knew who the vice president were. I don't remember who. Sorry. Her name escaped me. Sorry. It's Sorry, Hillary Clinton's vice president were, but I haven't seen any vice president work as much as Tim Walz have to get Kamala elected or get their president elected. And I think Tim Walz, and it is clear that he will be president of the United States if democracy is preserved. He is bound to be president of the United States, or at least be Democrat nominee for an election in a few decades from now. So I don't think I've seen, maybe because I've been paying more attention this year, but I don't think I remember any vice president working this hard to get the president elected. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, well, she's doing a double job. Being the first female vice president, she's already had a role there. Our vice, well, first of all, the entire role of vice president has evolved over 2.5 centuries. And it's
To be honest, I've seen more of Tim Walz these past months than I actually have of Kamala Harris this month, this election.
well, yeah. Well, he is. Of course, he's campaigning at full steam. Um, but I think he's good at that. But Kamala Harris has to also still be VP, so she still works with the that was really a pretty new role. Our VPs are a lot more involved in international activities than in the past. I mean, past VPs, even when Johnson became president, he had no idea really what Kennedy was doing. He was not really informed that much. And it isn't until really we get into the late 60s, actually Ford, Nelson Rockefeller became Ford's vice president. That was really the first time a VP really takes over and has a particularly extensive role in the administration of the executive branch. It just was, it had to evolve. It took, I mean, poor John Adams didn't even know what to do. He just kind of sat there, okay, but now what do I do? So, and most, and for most, it was
just sit on the beach, have a mojito.
What's that?
Just sit on the beach, have a mojito.
Yeah. Well, Teddy Roosevelt, they thought they got rid of Teddy Roosevelt. He was a progressive. And under McKinley, he thought, okay, we'll make him VP and it'll kill his career and he'll vanish from life. And he thought that's it. Then McKinley was murdered. at the World's Fair, and then all of a sudden, the cowboy is president. They were horrified because this was a known popular progressive in the Republican Party, which had become very conservative by 1900. And all of a sudden, we got Teddy, who is anything but a conservative by that definition. He still looks pretty conservative in our day and age, but he did want to control the big businesses. He wanted regulations. He wanted them curbed. He wanted their extreme power curbed, that they could not simply do what they wanted. He was not going to let them do it. And that was a horrifying thing to them. It was even worse when FDR gets in power, because there was actually a coup attempt against FDR in 34. So we had that. This is you read more into U.S. history, you realize, wow, these guys came close to having some other problems too. They're just not really well known until we dive into the political history. And our political history is very much tied to pop history as well. So it's an interesting mixture thing, which is why when someone from overseas looks, perhaps you have a different kind of election system, and you look at the American and go, my gosh, these guys are a circus. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you. I can't. I lose that argument very quickly. We can be a bit clownish. But
it hasn't really been as bad as it has been this year, though. No,
it could have been worse.
Even 2016 and 2020 was not as bad.
Yeah, this one is bad. This one
both has been Trump,
awful.
but none has been that bad, as bad as this year.
Yeah, but it's because Trump leads the clown show, and because I think now they've said this quiet parts out loud. And when they do that, everybody kind of goes nuts now because, oh dear Lord, no, you cannot, no. And so we're seeing, like I said, you're seeing a fusion Democratic Party, which is, I have no idea how it exists right now, except that they all agree. Look, we agree on absolutely no policies at all, but we do agree we have to keep the Constitution together, and we cannot allow the orange threat to ruin the Constitution. And so this is what you get: the Dick Cheneys, the Liz Cheneys. I mean, these are diehard conservatives. Mitt Romney is these are not liberals by any stretch of the imagination, except that they know Trump is a clear and present danger to every form of democratic normalcy. He is absolutely, it's not conservative versus liberal. This is a nutcase versus normalcy. And I told him, look, there are a lot of things I may or may not agree with Vice President Harris. However, normal is really a good thing right now. Even boring normal is a wonderful blessing compared to what we could have. And we had 4 years of that when the Orangeman was actually in the White House. Yes, it gave comedians a lot of work. Every single stand-up comic and every night show host had an abundance of material that night. There was no problem finding material for that night. But they're praying for boredom. I mean, after a while, look, I'd like to have to make up. I'd like a boring night for once. I would like, I would like to make up something this time instead of having something that's so ghastly. It's a horrifying thought.
I'm going to go on a limb here, and I think I'm gonna say that we are in a 1933 moment today. So if Trump gets elected, I think we maybe not 1938 or 94, as some people have said, but I think we are in a 1933 moment when the Hitler took power, and we see Trump. If Trump gets elected, we will see. Because there are people are bored. I've seen clips today on Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah.
Where they are boarding up the White House streets in Washington D.C. everywhere in the United States. They are expecting violence tonight after the polls, and the polls closes in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So
So, and some
first
are pretty close.
result
So
will
let's
come
take a
in,
look.
but people are expecting and remember the 1933 election in Germany when Hitler came to power. It was violent. They were forced. People weren't freely.
Yeah.
The Nazis weren't freely elected into power in Germany in 1933. People were forced to vote on the Nazi Party. The thirds of the SA, and I'm not sure that have you seen much of that this year tonight, but
Let
you
me
know
check
it's the
message.
people are. It just tells you something about how people feel about
Yeah.
this the culture United States have become, that people are boarding up and people are it kind of feel like what's a movie again where crime is allowed one night and they are all violence is allowed. It's almost like they're preparing for that I don't remember the movie in my head right now, but it's yeah, I'm sure you know which I'm talking about, but it's almost like they're preparing
Can
for a
you see
night
the
of
chats?
violence. There's no new message in the chat as
Okay,
I can see.
I was thinking there's a chat
But
there. Okay.
yeah, but yeah, it's crazy how people actually preparing and expect that people might go violent
Yeah.
tonight.
So I think I've sent you links of other historians who specialize in authoritarian governments, particularly the um, 20s and 30s. And this is something that we did not want because the fascist is an ideology is very European, but basically we have our own dark variant of fascism here. We've probably had it forever, but the it's just becoming so glaringly obvious right now. Um, and that so even our historians who are they don't want to use terms like that because they're misleading. They're starting to use terms like that because it's just too darn accurate.
Yeah.
um, I said, yeah, I think that's it's our variant. I mean, it's got red, white, and blue all over it, but it's fascism. Um, and when Trump had the Madison Square Garden rally,
Mm,
I saw for about 12 seconds. I go, oh shoot,
yeah.
I know where this is from.
Mm.
you know, I posted that night. I said, this is
I
glaringly,
read that book somewhere.
yeah. I posted that and I said, this is glaringly obvious. This is not even remotely hidden. Um, this screams out, and we forget when studying World War II in our country, we really forget um, that we came precariously close to a fascist um, wing in the government. There was an awful lot because one of our biggest heroes, Charles Lindbergh, was glaringly fascist.
But again, it's not just in the United States that we see right
No,
wing politics is returning. We see this even in Germany. The AfD is coming back into. I believe they actually were chosen into parliament. Some of their leaders were chosen into parliament, and in
yeah,
Italy we have a right wing movement going on,
yeah. Well,
in
France,
France as
oh,
well,
that
and
one in
all
France,
over
yeah,
Austria as well.
yeah,
There we have had right wing parties being elected, and they're gaining popularity because they so it's not just in defense. It's not just in the United States.
no,
It's
no.
all a
It's
lot of
dangerous
places over
because,
Europe
yeah,
that we see right wing politics returning, and it's a scary time we live in.
yeah. And your country, like where you are, you're surrounded by all around you. It's, oh, come on, let's not do this again. This was, you know, this is a bad. These are bad things. You don't want to see this again. Um, all right. So the
So we
exit
have
poll.
two just joining in. Actually, just we will be four people very
Come on.
shortly. So we will
Oh,
have quite a debate. And I never had four people on the live stream before or any other show before. So we will see how it goes.
we'll
But so
see how
stay with
holds the
us.
technology holds up, shall we?
Hopefully the stream will hold. But
Yep. Can you hear me
so
fine
stay
though?
with us. But yeah, we are about to discuss right wing politics in Europe at the moment. So let's talk a little bit about how and what do you think is the main issue why right? And we've seen the riots in the terrorist riots in the UK
Right.
just a few months ago. So what do you think it is about right wing politics returning to Europe at this time? Is it because of the wars in Ukraine and because of the
towards
Goes back
Israel,
earlier.
of course, anti-Semitism as well. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not, I'm not saying that I'm not no fan of Israel myself, but it's
But Israel's
anti-Semitism
not
as well
Jewish.
is
Yeah,
rising
you can't
in the
mix up
world because of
the
this.
ethnic Jews with Israel. You know, the government of Israel, is a very conservative um, government right now. It's actually a very secular state. It's not at all a religious state. Um, so you had this thing. Yeah, we seem to go through phases in world history, particularly the last 2 centuries. I'm thinking back 1848. There was the great, almost like a European spring, revolutions in Bavaria, in Prussia, in France, some in England. Throughout a lot of the European kingdoms, all had these radical leftist, or well, Republican revolutions or movements that by the end of 48, 49 got squelched. And so you had this movement toward republicanism that seems to be going, and then it is absolutely crushed um, in a conservative, tidal wave, 48, 49. And a lot of those, like for example, here in the United States, a lot of the radicals from Germany came to the U.S. And some of them were Carl Schurz.
Sorry if I seem distracted, but I'm trying to help out. Just coming on, he has some issues
All right.
logging into the stream. But yeah, keep talking. So sorry if I seem distracted.
No, yeah, I'll let you manage what's going on there. But yeah, so, we had a lot of the radicals from out of Europe coming to the U.S. before 1860s, and it was safer here. So in the 1840s, they established themselves, and we see them as Lincoln supporters in the 1860s, late 50s to 60s. That because Lincoln's, that they become an important part of the U.S. political scene by 1860. In fact, Lincoln even buys a German newspaper. He buys a newspaper. He is basically the hidden owner, and he turns it over to a German editor, and so it becomes a Republican, the new Republican paper in the German language. That would help support Lincoln among the Germans, with a huge German population, in particularly Ohio and Midwest. Again, they're more recent immigrants from the Rhineland, who are radicals, and they hate the Know Nothing Party. They do not like the Know Nothing Party and the Immigrant Party. They know they don't like them, but they also know that don't like Democrats either, because that's a pro-slave party, and they're very conservative. So the Republicans seem to be where they land, by 1860, and definitely by 64. So that's kind of a neat, thing. But I think we go through this stage by stage. I think that the post-French Revolution, the French Revolution is a radical time, and then with the Congress of Vienna, you have a conservative reaction to the French Revolution. Then in 48, we have the radical revolutions, and then the conservative reaction against that again. I'm not sure what brought this one on, though. I would love to hear somebody else commenting on that one, particularly other parts. For us, it looks like the Obama election brought out our really ugly race side. He is a liberal, and he was black, and I think that just that brought out a part of us that we keep thinking we had buried. We kept thinking, well, no, that's buried now. No, it's still there. And so, but we've also, and from my research, but what I was reading more recently, last 10 years recently, our Christian right has been very instrumental, because they're a huge voting bloc. And people we were trained, the last 40, 50 years to vote conservative. And there are millions of Protestants and Catholic conservatives, millions. And they vote as blocks. to be a Christian, you got to vote Republican, and this is only really broken up in the last 10 years, and that
So,
more dramatically.
if I may interrupt you again, I think it's 7 o'clock now. It's five
Yep.
past seven, and I think the polls have
Seven.
officially
Okay,
closed.
Sherry, I'm getting messages
So,
now.
so where, so again, so so now it's the voting has stopped, and
Yeah, well, that's the East Coast. We
yeah.
have four time zones we got to go through.
How long do you think it will be until
All right, it's already started
the
here.
first election results
On
start coming in?
oh gosh, yeah, already seeing electoral votes coming up. This is on let's see who said this. This is the Times, Sunday Times, and they're showing 19 electoral votes for Trump, 3 for Harris, and that is at 7:06 Eastern Standard Time.
Just one. I'm using CNN, and there has not come any
Yeah, I
result
just had
here
to see.
on the
Yeah,
screen. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Here
I
we
don't
go.
see any result yet
Are
on
we gonna
my
get hired by a
stream.
big news company?
We have another guest on. Please
All
welcome
right, here we
Woody.
go.
Woody Holton. Hello,
Woody,
how are you?
hi, Woody.
Here as well. Is there everything? Is this even a little bit laggy there?
Let's
How
see.
are you?
Can you guys hear me? I can hear you fine.
I can hear you.
Perfectly,
I'm
right
very
now.
good.
Hello.
I'm very good.
So the polls are closed,
Yeah.
and the results
Well, on the
are
East Coast
soon
polls,
start
yeah.
coming in. What are your expectations?
Well, some of the
Your
polls are closed.
expectation tonight? What do you expect? We won't obviously get any result tonight, but what do you think we'll see in tonight's election?
Well, I have to say at the start that I'm very aware of how we are all influenced by what we want to believe. Um, I do think, however, just looking at the numbers of women who have voted, that is sufficient to persuade me that Kamala Harris is going to win. I also listen to a lot of conservative radio. As you, I'm sure, are aware, the whole Trump phenomenon has been driven by a new thing on the American landscape in the last 30 years or so, right-wing media. Everyone's heard of Fox News, but even more significant, I think, are the talk shows.
Just
And
interrupting
I've
you.
been
Another
listening to those
guest.
talk.
Hello,
What's that?
Lindsay. Welcome. Just keep talking. Woody is on the
Hi, Lindsay.
microphone not now, so keep talking about what we're going to get to you in a second, Lindsay. But Woody
Okay.
is going to keep
And
talking
I'll
about your expectations.
I'll remember to be briefer as well. But the point is, I have two reasons to be confident that Kamala Harris is going to win. One is just the percentage of women who have voted has been very high, and we know of a large gap, a gender gap between Harris supporters are more likely to be female and Trump supporters are more likely to be male, and so the fact that women are voting in higher numbers than men, and that it tends to be the case in most years, but it's certainly holding up this year's, and turnout seems to be so incredibly high when you combine the early voting to the voting that went on today. So that's one reason that I think that Kamala Harris is going to pull it out. The other reason is that I've been listening to right-wing radio, and they seem very concerned, and they're not saying it openly, but they don't have that cocky air that they had about them even a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit better than gut instinct. It's based on evidence, but as I said, I'm aware that my reading of the evidence is influenced by what I want to see, because I will say, as a historian of American democracy, I do think that former President Trump is a threat to that.
Yeah.
He has said that he wants to take away the licenses of TV stations that disagree with him or criticize him, and he said that he wants to put people in jail because he doesn't like some of the things they've said. So just setting aside all the political issues, just whether we're going to have a rule of law and nobody trying to overthrow elections and things like that, and whether we're going to put people into prison for their views. We've done that. I'm sorry, embarrassed to say, as an American, we've done that a lot of times in our
Yeah.
history. Usually
World War
during
II,
wars.
World War II,
Lincoln,
for
who's my
example,
favorite
when we put
president, he
Japanese in
did it during
prison.
the Civil War, and we locked up Japanese Americans. In fact, it's the same law passed during my period. I studied the 1700s, the 18th century, and a law was passed during a war against France in 1798. Not many people know about that war because it was fought only or almost entirely at sea. But during that war, Congress felt the need to crack down on dissenters and passed a series of laws that we call the Alien and Sedition Acts. But one in particular was called the Alien Enemies Act, and it was never repealed. And so, very sadly, one of my favorite presidents, Franklin Roosevelt, was able to use that law to lock up innocent Japanese Americans. And it's still in the books now, and Trump has announced that he will be using that law. I think he's saying he's only going to use it against immigrants, but we'll see. So he has persuaded me. This is not anything I've heard from the opposition side, but he has persuaded me that he has no commitment to rule of law or, the thing that we all know from sports, whether you live in a democracy or an aristocracy or anything in between. When I lose a game of tennis against you, I come up to the net and I shake your hand and say, good game. I may think that the umpire should have called some of those balls in on your side and out on my side, but I lost. I come up and I shake your hand and it's over. And Trump, I think because of, and I'm not a psychologist, but I do think because of just a terrible, terrible narcissist.
Yeah.
And he's just the thinnest skin in the world. But for whatever reason, we don't analysis. I just don't think he believes in our system. And so I'm for almost anybody who runs against him. I've met Kamala Harris a few years ago, found her charming.
That's amazing.
And so I do have a personal prejudice in favor. I've never met Trump. Maybe I'd feel better about him if I had, but I have those reasons for being biased, but we'll know in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Now, Lindsay, you just joined us as well, and you live in a Republican state, and very much Republican. What are your expectations of the night? Because like I said earlier, the polls are closed for some of them, and so what are your expectations for tonight? And are you optimistic about tonight's election?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. As usual, it was a pleasure meeting you and meeting the guests. Good evening to you. What are my expectations? Well, I would like to expect that the American Republic, of which I am now a citizen, will stick to the rules. And it's very interesting that I live in a county which is just above Austin in central Texas, which is probably typical of most counties in Texas, which are certainly rightward leaning. But the city of Austin is not. And in fact, further down the road is Harris County, which is part of one of the largest counties. I think it's probably the largest county in Texas, which is also Democrat leading. And the governor here has done all sorts of things to try and make it very difficult for people to vote, including, for example, not allowing ballot boxes and so on. I think if you want to actually take your ballot, you actually have to go to like the 8th story of a building somewhere downtown and actually hand deliver it. It's kind of interesting how they've done that. But so my expectation is that here in Texas, it will be business as usual. The big argument right now is whether Cruz is going to lose his seat or the Democrat candidate will actually muster enough votes to oust him. And I think it's neck and neck. I can't tell you how that's going to turn out. But Texas will deliver a lot of electoral votes for Trump anyway. So that's pretty much, you could put that down as a certainty.
Now, I want to ask, and you don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but you are gay yourself. You have a boyfriend back in the UK. But if for gay rights and LGBTQ rights, should Trump win? How do you see this proceed in United States? How would gay rights be? How do you think this? What is the future there if Trump should win?
Well, I think it's difficult to know. Because on the one hand, the object
he'd be very vocal about trans rights and transgender in sport, etc.
Right, but let's remember that the LGBTQA+ is a very large tent, right? So gay people are one section of that, and the one that he seems to have picked on is the transgender community, which is part of it, and they're getting a very raw deal. They've become the sort of object of hate. I don't personally know any transgender people. I know several gay and bisexual people. Most of my friends are straight, actually, as it turns out. And a lot of them are women, by the way. Most of my friends are women. So from a personal perspective, my worry is really what the Supreme Court might do in terms of unwinding some of the things to do with things like same-sex marriage and equality. Because one particular Supreme Court judge has already unwound certain parts in terms of Roe v. Wade, and that then has ramifications in terms of other issues. But I don't know. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. This is, I think, my fourth election that I will have taken part in. So I always make a point, and of course, as we'll talk historically, I think typically the United States tends to have a very small number of people who typically turn out to vote. And it's always disheartening when, for example, we have local elections here in Williamson County or in the city of Austin, where turnouts for local city officials and plebiscites and so on are in the 20s and 30%. So this election is bringing out many more people. And hearing what he was sort of talking about earlier about women being a very large number of the people turning out. It was fascinating. When I voted early outside a Randall's store, I was actually a small number of men in the line. It was mostly women and certainly older women, and I was delighted to see that because I have no idea what they're voting. That's entirely their prerogative. But what I keep seeing on X is the large numbers of men who have now showed up in the lines outside polling stations across the United States. So I don't know whether that will actually counterbalance it. We will find this out in the fullness of time, of course, what the actual split of the vote is.
No, unfortunately, we are just old men. I didn't find any women, unfortunately, that I was aware of that could participate in this chat. So again, we are old men here. But I think we all agree on this issue. So, because abortion has been a big part of this today, and of course, the conservative Republicans have talked about how they are especially J.D. Vance have been very vocal about how the abortion issue should be handled. So what are your thoughts on, has abortion been a critical part of why people go out to vote? And of course, most people agree that a woman's body should be her choice, right? It's obvious that if you have a baby and you don't feel ready to have a baby yet, you should be able to take out a baby. You shouldn't have to ruin your college career or educational career because you have a kid. And but has the issue of abortion been a critical one this election more than any other elections, you think? I mean, let's start with Thomas first, and then we're going to hear most people, everyone's opinion here. But let's start with Thomas. Do you think, what are your thoughts on this? Thomas,
Who did you put that to?
Woody.
Sorry,
Thomas.
I want you to, Thomas, if you wouldn't mind starting on the issue with your thoughts here.
Growing up in an evangelical household, it's hard to say, we were taught when I was young, abortion was our key thing to vote against. Not realizing that it also, when you lump abortion in as a birth control, but also as any form of medical care that involves removing anything out of the uterus, in abortion. Not realizing this, we tended to lump the thing as one word and not grasping actually what was being done. Also, and I've told others this, I said for the Christians that you wanted to end abortion, but doing so in the way we did it, using the power of the state, the Supreme Court like this, you have done it, you've made a Faustian bargain. And in that, you will actually lose that in the end. So I've argued that voting on one thing like this is too narrow. You're not grasping the complexity of abortion itself, but also how politics interacts with other things. So being a single issue voter was not bright. But it was embedded in our preaching, is embedded in the teaching since the 70s. I mean, hammered into us. It took me a long time I'm still opposed to abortion as birth control, but I can't stop it in that way. I have to do it another way. I have to help the mother. Okay, how do you help the mother with a crisis pregnancy? How do you help the family to I have to go that direction. I cannot go at it with the blunt trauma of legislation. And we were always taught that you need the Supreme Court, and it was blunt trauma. So all Christianity became power-based. And we're now seeing this vast Christian bloc voting for power, not for faith. And so, we're seeing an entire corrupted faith. In my case, an entire couple generations corrupted by this. And this is going to end up where we're all going to pay for this. And trouble is, everybody else is going to pay along with us. If we get that kind of party in power. So so my fear actually in this election is Trump's bad enough, but it's the religious followers that are following him. Those are the ones I'm scared of. Because
and we see right now on my screen behind me here, and you can't see it on here obviously, but on my screen behind me we see that there is 3 for Harris and 19 for Trump.
Yeah.
Woody, you haven't started talking in a while, so what are your thoughts on the election so far with 3 votes, 19 against
Don't look
3?
at the 3 versus 19.
No.
Those early numbers are pretty meaningless. But you're going to get a significant number very soon. I just learned today that in Georgia has passed a law saying that the elections officials have to release the early vote within 1 hour of the polls closing. And they closed at 7. So within 38 minutes, and maybe sooner than that, they are just going to dump their entire, almost their entire vote in, because something close to 80% of Georgians voted before election day. And I see that they've only reported 3.5% right now. But once they're reporting 83.5%, you're going to have a much better idea about Georgia. And I would say certainly, I would expect Trump to win Georgia, even though Biden won Georgia last time. But if Harris wins Georgia, I think it's going to be almost impossible for Trump to beat her nationwide. I don't know if the others agree on that.
Because it may indicate what the mood has been in voters around the country. If a red state can go say, now Indiana is so, I live in Indiana, we are so red, it's ridiculous. Except for Muncie and Indianapolis. Indy is pretty brutal.
Hey, while we're on the subject of abortion, Erlend, may I ask a question myself?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Because I'm very interested, Thomas. You and I know you through the Ben Franklin book club, but I didn't know that you had once been. You may still be evangelical, because of course there are evangelicals all along the political spectrum. But your view on abortion has changed radically. I will say, when I went to college, I can see why so many of the people in the Trump movement are anti-education, because college did change me. My parents were moderate Republicans, very pro. Lincoln was my father's hero, just as he's mine, and I see he's yours, Tom. But I went thinking that the U.S. I started college in 1977. The Vietnam War was only 4 years in the past, and I thought, well, it was a mistake, but it was kind of a noble cause. It wasn't my teachers so much as my college roommate who straightened me out on that. You can see why DeSantis in Florida is attacking the universities.
I was lucky. I went to a Christian college.
My question was for you, Tom. Is that where you changed on some of these things? And I don't mean to say you've been born again as a
no. The starting point. I'm a Christian. Little. The starting point came because I went to a Christian school, but that Christian school insisted. I mean, they battered for little pointy heads that if you're going to be a Christian scholar, you have to integrate your faith in your learning. And it has to be a lifelong commitment to do this before you start, participating in the public. And so I was going to be a historian since about fourth grade. And when I started diving into this, and I bit by bit, I had a dear professor, and I brought in, I remember this book came out in the 70s, The Light and the Glory by Peter Marshall. It's a cherry-picked, long-scale history, of all the, from Columbus on, who are all actually evangelicals and, closet evangelicals. And my dear professor did not simply mock me, but he said to me, I think the lady protesteth too much. And he was such a gentleman, because I was so certain on so many things I didn't know. And that started the process,
right,
where I had to learn, and because they would not let me out until I could do this. That they want to make sure if I believed, you better know why. And you have to be able to answer the tough, hard questions, the hardest questions, because so we had the conservative, but we also had sojourners. We had Jim Wallace, Tony Campolo was a big hero on our campus. So we had all these. So that began to push, but it's been a lifetime, because I've taken this idea that lifelong learning absolutely to heart, and I've spent my life on it. I was pushing my kids to do it, and they're and my grandkids now. So this is something that, by the way, I started college too in 1977. I just realized.
Is that right?
Same
age.
Yeah.
You remind me, by the way, that I had a professor who asked me to name my favorite historian, and I said Eric Hofstadter. And this was as an undergrad, so I didn't know many historians, so that's the one I named. And he goes, I want you to write me an essay. Just pick any Hofstadter book that you haven't read yet. Go read it and tell me why it's terrible. And that was a wonderful exercise to
I bet it was.
We should.
If I may interfere, we have to get back to the current election. That's something we discussed this. Sorry, guys. Sorry, you can discuss this afterwards. But
sorry.
But not to get too related. We're trying to. The election is kind of the main thing tonight. But
all right.
Woody, we talked about this earlier today, and we lost. I think we had lost Lindsay with connection issues, but unfortunately, we will try to get him back in a second.
Dear.
But I want to begin because we discussed the Iowa poll recently that it said 47%. But right now, when I'm looking at this, it does not look very good for Harris at the current moment. But let's discuss why it was the. Oh, we got Lindsay Powell back, and you haven't spoken in a while, so I want to begin with you, Lindsay. No, we lost him again. So, so he has some connection issues, unfortunately. But let's begin with you, Woody. What are your thoughts on the Iowa 47 and 44% poll that we had seen recently in the last few days?
Well, in the same way that I think that. I've been listening to right-wing radio. I've also been listening to and watching MSNBC and CNN and the more liberal sources, and the way they have latched on to that Iowa poll. Again, these are people that I'm sympathetic to, but I think they're kind of grasping at straws. It could be right, it could be wrong, but there are hundreds of polls out there, the play that one poll got, to me, shows just wishful thinking. That people are grasping. I mean, if that's the best we've got, that makes me that makes me more pessimistic. I start off by saying I think that Kamala Harris is going to pull it out. Oh, I'll give you another point in favor of that fact. Trump has just never gone over 48% of the popular vote, and there's no huge reason to think that he would suddenly do that on the third try. There's people who become the more you get to know them, the more you like them. But I'm not sure Trump is one of those people. I think a lot of people are, even people on the right, are somewhat sick of them. And it may be a reason to go right in Ronald Reagan or something like that. And so anyway, there's lots of reasons to go in both ways. But you were saying you were seeing something pessimistic, and I have to go pretty soon. But I wish I didn't, because you need someone to just sort of keep feeding you warm soup. because elections are like this.
Sorry,
You know,
we're having
the
some connection
this,
issues
you
with
know,
Lindsay.
is
Can,
this,
can you
I mean,
Try to sorry again to interrupt you, but can you hear me? Try to speak now, Lindsay. If you can hear me, I want to hear your thoughts on the results so far. He said in private
West
messages, but
Virginia.
try to say
I don't
something,
think I can hear you
Lindsay, to
now.
see if you can.
Lindsay.
Hey. Yeah. No, I'm sorry, but we have some issues with Lindsay right now, so sorry about that. Like I said, we've never done 4 people at once this before. But
Of
again, I
course.
wanted to just
Lindsay, put
go
up a
back
finger
to
if you can hear us. Can you
the.
hear?
I don't know if we can, but yeah, I'm sorry if you have some issues with that. How to you can try again, try to load off and load on again to see if that works. Maybe like I said, I've never done more than 2 people, so but yeah, my screen has just done the commercial right now. But Thomas, what are your connections? Your thoughts on the results so far? Because so
Uh,
far it seems to be in
it
favor of
is.
Trump.
Yeah, and no, it's this. I'm looking at these numbers here. Um, it's so early. That even a state might not be called yet. Of course, Kentucky, Indiana, those and West Virginia, those are so red states. They kind of just kind of an assumption there. Um, Michigan and Pennsylvania are important because they're large. Well, they're large blocks, um, and those can swing blue pretty easily, and so.
So
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
we see right now that West Virginia, the
yeah,
result has not come in West Virginia yet.
yeah, it's been tentatively called. So
Okay, is it better now, Lindsay? Is it better now?
I can actually hear something now.
There you
oh,
go. Hey, he's
all
back.
right.
We had some connection. Like I said, we never had 4 people on the show before, so
Right.
so it's the first time for everything, I think. So, but what are your thoughts on the? We discussed in the election, and that is obviously the main theme tonight. And I'm not sure if you have time to go into historical elections, unfortunately. But what are your thoughts on the results so far?
I haven't seen any. I mean, I've not seen anything at all. I've been listening
Too
on
soon.
NPR.
It's too soon.
So just
I mean, don't forget. So the actual polls are still open here in Texas. It's not 7 o'clock yet. So
Right. Yep.
so there's no sort of overt electioneering going on. And what I can say is, like I said, I expect that the rules be followed. I find it very distressing that the governor decided that federal observers would not be allowed into polling stations. I don't know what they've quite got that they think they've got to hide. But anyway, there we are. The thing I heard last, before all the technical difficulties, was about abortion. And I think it's very, very much an issue in Texas because I think we have the most draconian of any of the conditions. I think it's like 6 weeks or a heartbeat or whatever they call a heartbeat. And we've actually had some terrible situations here in Texas once, just very recently, where a young, I think she was a teenager, she died because of a complete and utter foul up by the medical establishment trying to make head and tail of the law. So it is a very raw issue for women here in the state. And I would imagine many of those women that were actually in that line outside Randall's, where I was voting early, probably were standing to make sure that they were heard on that issue. So I think it's worrying in that regard. But anyhow, so you asked for a historical perspective. I think what's very interesting about this is that this republic was founded by a group of men who were steeped in Enlightenment education, which was classical education, effectively.
Oh no.
Oh, I was excited to hear that.
Sorry you fell off again, but again, so far it's overwhelmingly Vermont and Florida and Kentucky have all been very in favor of Trump, and Kamala
No, Vermont is for Harris.
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
That's all
So
predictable.
Vermont might be one of the few states so far that has been pro, because
Erlend,
Florida
you're
and
worrying way too soon. You're worrying way too soon.
I
Yeah.
mean,
It's all
so
about
far, like I
seven
said,
states.
so far. I said so far, but
You did. You did.
Florida is a swing state. So what do we expect in Florida? As I believe it's a swing state. I think it was the last time, has been the last few elections. So what are your expectations there?
ever since 2000.
Let's begin with Woody. Let's begin with Woody ahead first.
Oh no, I don't think there's any reason to think that Florida is going to be in play, except unless I heard a new concept on the radio today, soccer grannies. That is, it was the soccer moms who elected Obama both times that he won the presidency. But some of those same moms are now grandmothers, but they can remember the time before Roe v. Wade. I can remember, vaguely the 60s and early 70s before Roe v. Wade, and then they can remember the half century almost under Roe v. Wade. And there does seem to be a lot of older women coming out to vote. And of course, that's a major part of the Florida electorate. So if Harris has any chance in Florida, and I don't think she does, it might be these older women coming out to vote. I'll give you an anecdote, which is worthless, but have you ever heard of a place called the Villages in Florida? Erlend, there's no reason you would have heard of it, but it's a whole city of old people, a large city of old people. Yeah. And not all of them have cars, but they all have golf carts.
Yeah.
And this year, for the first time, there was a Democratic golf cart parade alongside the Republican golf cart parade. So I think it's the issue. I'm so sorry that we've lost Lindsay, because it's the issue he was saying that is driving a lot of women to the polls. You mentioned this too, Tom, which is abortion. So
I think Virginia.
I think it's going to be an abortion election, despite all. We're going to watch Republicans win Tennessee and my state, South Carolina, and lots of others. But it's all going to come down to the 7 states, and I think it's really going to come down to Pennsylvania, and I think she's going to win.
I want to talk a little bit about the electoral college, because that is how Trump won the 2016 election, though Clinton was, of course, in majority of the votes. Do you think that the how is the electoral college impression been in this year's election? Is it more, from what I heard, they are more even on Harris? But what are your thoughts on, even if Harris were to lose the popular vote, could she have won like Trump did the electoral college this year, even if she loses the popular vote? Thomas, what do you think about this?
What do you first?
Oh, he said Thomas.
All right.
I'll say one quick thing before you go, Tom.
Let's give
the ironic thing will be if Trump.
You're the early Americanist.
You guys just try to handle two people at once. You guys try to see how easy this is. But yeah, Thomas, let's hear your thoughts on who could win the electoral college.
Where do we start drinking?
I already am.
Let's go, Tom.
Thomas,
we started out. We chatted a little bit about this. The electoral college is a bit of an archaic system, and I remember Heather Cox Richardson talked about this. That in 29 we capped Congress or the House at a set level, so that so basically each congressman just gets more and more and more people that represent. And so we have less and less actual representation. We're getting more to like virtual representation. And the Electoral College follows that same pattern. Well, the chance of getting enough congressmen to actually fit the pattern prior to 1929, you would need a stadium to fit them all. But if we expanded the Electoral College to the numbers as it would be if we kept up 1920 on, then the Electoral College would give greater weight than to your urban areas. You'd have more and more votes count in the urban areas. Our computer argue, well, that means no one comes to the farm areas. Well, you cannot ignore your majority. And right now, little states with very small population control too much. And so the Electoral College is skewed toward rural states, but that was what the Republicans were doing in the teens and 20s. It was designed so that because most voters are not going to know the candidate from Vermont if you're from South Carolina. You're just not going to know that person. And so the Electoral College would be those people who would be more in the know, and they could catch up and they'd do the final vote kind of based on the popular vote, but they would be independent of that one. Jefferson, and after 1800, they modified, got a lot more states to do all or nothing. They would be able to, once a state has a majority, then all the electoral votes go toward the winning candidate, as opposed to splitting them up. And if we, several things we could do instead of raising the numbers in Congress, but the electoral college is archaic, I think, and is due for a major overhaul. Woody, how about you?
I agree with everything you said.
Oh, wow.
But I also want to point out the irony that if, as you posited, Erlend, that if Trump wins the popular vote but not the electoral college vote, if you thought he complained about the 2020 election, he's going to suddenly say, no, but the people are for me. And he's going to forget, of course, the fact that that's how he won in 2016 was without the popular vote. He's going to call it the most illegitimate election. He's going to tell his supporters to come to Washington and beat the hell out of Congress and somehow try to overturn it. But, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. And so that would be kind of an enjoyable result to watch. I don't think the majority of Americans will ever vote for Trump.
No, it's always a minority. I think also,
but it would be ironic. You got the majority.
Finally, we have Lindsay back again. He's like an on and off girlfriend coming back on and off again tonight. So we are just in chat. I want to talk a little bit about historical elections in a second and take a break from the current election. But Lindsay, what do you think will happen this time? Do you think that the electoral college will play the majority? Because we are discussing the electoral college this time, and of course, as you said, that is how Trump won the 2016 election. But what do you think the electoral college will play this year election?
Crikey! I mean, I've actually watched two excellent PBS documentaries about the electoral college, and it seems to be an invention of the Enlightenment mind. It's a bizarre anachronism. And ironically, in researching Roman elections again tonight, I was just wondering, in a sense, its complexity and its origins go all the way back to the Roman Republic. And there they had a number of what were called comitia. They were assemblies of different groups of people. And complexity was built into the way that those things functioned. So you can imagine if you're Jefferson or you're one of the other founding fathers, so-called, and they know all of this. I mean, they're reading Livy and they're reading Tacitus, so they kind of know how the Roman government works, and they're trying their best, I think, to create a constitution which embodies all of the good things of Athenian democracy and Roman democracy in the sense that the Roman Respublica was one. And they're also trying to make it live for their own time. But what they had in common was basically men with money got to vote. And if you weren't a man and you had no money, you didn't have a vote. So in that regard, it was very similar to the Roman setup. Although, of course, the great majority of people in the Roman Republic were actually plebeians. And in fact, many of them were quite poor. But they did have a vote, which, interesting enough, is where it differs from the early days of the American Constitution and so on. But what I was looking at, for example, that there are several parts you need to understand about how the Roman Republic works. We've all heard of SPQR, which means Senatus Populusque Romanus, which basically means Senate and people of Rome, or Roman people. And we tend to think of those as being two things in conflict. And to some degree, they were born out of a struggle when Rome kicked out its kings in 509 and established what it tried to have was where the common people had to say in their fate. But what they actually created it wasn't just simply a bunch of people and a Senate. In fact, they had several different of these committees and so on. And one of them, for example, just to give you a case here, the one was called the Comitia Centuriata, which is where the Roman people were basically divided up into their tribes. There were 35 tribes, 31 of those were in Italy, and 4 tribes were in Rome. And this group of people would meet and they would elect certain key magistrates within the Roman system. They'd include, for example, praetors and curule aediles and quaestors. And these people between them would manage, for example, the courts, public buildings, the water supply, and this type of thing. But the fact that there were 35 tribes, when if you wanted to vote and you lived in, for example, Cremona, you had to come all the way to Rome to vote. So in fact, it always meant that there was a large number of people who were Roman citizens that actually didn't have a vote at all, unless they could actually go to the city and actually express it. So there was always a bias in the Roman system to those who were resident within the city and therefore had a profile, and that tended to favor certain groups of people over other ones. There was another group called the Comitia Tributa, which actually basically where people were aligned into 193 voting blocks effectively. And these were centuries of people, which seems to have been the way that they organized the legions initially. But 80 of these centuries were patrician people, who were the people who basically had a monopoly of the priesthoods, and they were the people who occupied most of the senatorial seats. And then there were 18, so 80s go to the patricians. 18 go to the next group of people who are called equestrians. They're people who basically are given horses and become the cavalry for several hundred years. And then the rest of them are these plebeian groups. So all you needed to do was have the 80 of the centuries with the 18 of the other centuries, and it didn't matter what the other ones felt anymore, because already they had a first past the vote. They had a decisive win for a piece of law. And I think in the sense that in the way that the Roman system built in that sort of prejudice, if you will, against the poorer people, I wonder in a way that there's some element of that reflected in the American Constitution. For the longest time.
If you can care to comment on Lindsay, how much of the Roman political system is built in the American Constitution? Because you are an historian of the American Revolution and early American history. So what are your thoughts on this, comparing Roman elections to early American elections?
Well, so what I find interesting, I was going to just throw this in, I literally have 10 minutes and then I will disappear. I'll be disappearing. I'm actually having an election dinner with some British expats who are also citizens, and we've all voted, so we'll be comparing notes while we watch Sky News, which is actually broadcasting on the American election.
So you're rich because you had Sky News. That was a little
well, I'm going to have
PBS joke.
And Sky News, so we'll actually try.
I watch Sky News.
Yeah. And I think they're pretty much fair. I think what's very interesting is it's interesting to put into some historical perspective the frequency with which Romans were voting on things. So consuls were voted every year. Quaestors, praetors actually only served 1 year. And there, for example, were something like 40 praetors, I think. No, I'm sorry. There were up to 18 praetors. There were 6... there were. Look at my notes here. There were up to 40 quaestors, 2 curial aediles, up to 18 praetors, and they all served 1 year terms, and they had to be voted in every single time. So the Romans were constantly going to the elections. They would elect people in July, and those people would then take their offices on the 1st of January. And what's really interesting, in a way that we've just heard the Supreme Court in this country effectively create an imperial president who can do pretty much anything he likes, that would be anathema to the Romans. They had a name for that, which was called dictator, who could only actually basically serve for 6 months. And during that time, he was basically absolved of any crime he may do, because his appointment was induced by an emergency. But in all other magistracies, yes, you may well use your imperium, which is to say your power to command and exercise authority. But here's the thing. When you finish, you are accountable for it. And if you made some bad decisions, your people will hold you account for it. The Romans had this thing where you could actually be forced into exile. It was actually denied fire and water, was in fact what the Romans said. And the most famous example of that is Marcus Tullius Cicero. And Cicero in 63 BC, famously, he would argue, actually stymied a coup d'etat by a group of people who'd rallied around a man called Sergius Catilina.
Just excuse me, I will be right back, and just keep talking, but I'll be right back, and I'll be right with you.
So basically what he did, he exposed the plot and actually sentenced Catilina to execution, and this was not legal. A Roman citizen is supposed to have a trial of his peers, and in fact, uttering the words "civis Romanus sum," basically evokes those privileges, which means you cannot be executed, you cannot be tortured. And in fact, if you are found guilty, you're not executed, you're basically asked to leave Italy. And there were a great many Romans who actually lived their last years in exile as a means, because the idea of being privileged enough to live in Rome or Italy was to be denied that, in fact, was to be denied life, effectively fire and water was the way they described it. So what I find fascinating is that we now have a situation where accountability is no longer part of the system. I mean, it seems to be that politicians in this country now can pretty much do very bad things. And if you get great representation in court, you can probably be actually absolved of them or actually escape penalty for those sorts of things. And now we actually have this imperial presidency. We have effectively a dictator who can rule for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think the Romans would be quite shocked by that.
Yeah. I had I lost my family
I agree.
because I commented back in 2016, 17 that just saying the presidency, because I was working at a Lincoln Museum earlier, and I began to realize, again, going back into political history, that we needed to curb the power of the presidency itself.
Yeah.
That we just, we'd allowed the Cold War, and we'd allowed culture to expand this beast until it becomes, a dictatorship, temporary dictatorship. And there is a nephew who has blocked me, banned me, and will not allow his kids to, my nieces and nephews to talk with me because I am I'm a dark horse now. So I have several family members who simply will not comment with me at all.
Now, which about
Well, and of course, the Supreme Court has just made the president more of a dictator than ever by giving him immunity.
Yeah.
From
we don't to take away from the current election. I want to take a look at the early elections in the United States. And one some of the first election, and like Lindsay said before he had to go, was for example how if you lived in Ravenna, you had to go to Rome to vote. And how was this in the first U.S. election? Because it was even though there was not just 30 states, you had quite a distance to get all the votes in for final result from all the states. That it took quite a while. We didn't have trains back then, and etc. So on all the modern technology. So if you lived in a state far away from Washington,
and they had problems
how was
early
early
elections, but that wasn't one of them. The one thing that really marred the presidential elections early on, not the first two, because Washington was unanimous for being both times he won the Electoral College unanimously. But then once Adams came up, you started to have the problem of people playing tricks, and the tricks were possible because the way they decided, and I think this is how he chose the student government leaders when I was in high school, the top two finishers are president and vice president. And so the other side realized that they could mess with that, and they almost pushed John Adams' vice presidential candidate ahead of him. And then they tried to do the same thing with Jefferson on the other side, sort of reciprocating for that. That is, when Jefferson outpolled John Adams in the Electoral College in 1800, there was an effort to put his running mate, Aaron Burr, ahead of him. So yes, he'd be not a Federalist, but the Federalists would have some control over him because they gave him the votes to put him ahead of his top of the ticket guy, Jefferson. So anyway, there was some weirdness in the presidential elections. They fixed it with the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, which says that the president and vice president have to run together. But the issue you're mentioning, it takes a long time to get the electoral vote from South Carolina up to New York, which is where the capital originally was for the during the first election, and they moved to Philadelphia for 10 years and then on to Washington, D.C. So yes, things took a while to travel, but that actually, they were used to that. Everything took a long time finding out whether there was a war on. took a long time to reach the other side of the continent. So no, I don't think that geography was a big problem just because they were accustomed to that. But as I said, one of the big mistakes I think almost everybody admits, and they admitted at the time, was thinking that, oh, we could just have the top vote getter become president and the number 2 vote getter be vice president. That did not work. And so now, of course, I couldn't vote for Harris without voting for Walz, or I couldn't vote for J.D. Vance without getting Trump as well. They run as a team. But can I say one other thing? And then I have to go soon too. I'm sorry to say, as I told you, about the Electoral College. I was fascinated to learn some of that stuff from Lindsay, and I'm going to be looking for those documentaries he's talking about.
Yeah.
But one interesting angle on the Electoral College that not many people are aware of is that slavery had a lot to do with the Constitutional Convention's decision to have an Electoral College. And even Madison said, look, I would rather choose the president by popular election. There's Madison, the author of the Constitution, said at the Constitutional Convention, my preference would be to elect the president by popular vote. But there's a problem with that my fellow Southern delegates have, and that is if you elect the president just by whoever got the most votes, then you're not able to award bonus votes to the slaveholders. And the slaveholders believed they deserved bonus votes because the population at the time of the first census, a couple years after the Constitution in 1790, was 3 million people, of whom about 600,000 or 1 in 5 were slaves. And because of the principle that Lindsay was talking about, that representatives kind of represented people, but they also represented property, and enslaved people were both of that. Black people were both humans and property. And so South Carolina and Georgia in particular thought, well, if we're going to pay more taxes because our slaves accounted for taxes, then and they didn't want to do that. But once they'd lost that battle, they said, if we're going to have to pay taxes on our slaves, then we should get extra votes because of our slaves. And that, of course, was the origins of the 3/5 clause. And that's fine for electing the House of Representatives. That's, they divide up the representative seats among the states, giving extra weight bonus representatives to the South. But for electing the president, if you're going to elect the president directly, you can't just say, okay, Georgia, you can have 1,000 extra votes, and South Carolina, you're bigger than Georgia, so you can have 3,000 extra votes. You can't just give them extra votes. So you had to create this medium in between the voters and the president of the Electoral College, and that way you could sort of slip in some extra electors in the Electoral College as a bonus, as a reward, weirdly enough, for the slaveholders for their virtuous act of having slaves. Of course, speaking sarcastically, they got extra votes in the Electoral College. And most, not all, but most historians say if it hadn't been for the Electoral College, Thomas Jefferson would not have defeated John Adams to become president in 1800.
We have a comment that plantation owners Northerners, but what are you have a comment here that says that most plantationers were Northerners, but what do you have to say to this, Woody?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you're asking.
That there's a comment here that says that most plantationers were Northerners, but that's
not
really
true.
Yeah,
that's not true. Hey, as a guy from the South myself, I'd love to try to exonerate us, but no, the big planters were from long-standing families. That's how they got wealthy, is that they were there first and sold slaves to other people. A lot of the big names in Virginia, where I came from, if you go just back a couple of generations, they got land and sold it to other people, but some of them were slave traders and sold slaves to other people. That's wrong to say that they were Northerners. Now, I think it's important to understand that the North was implicated in slavery because if you take a place like Pennsylvania, our big battleground state in this election, only about 5% of Pennsylvanians were enslaved, but the whole state depended on the slave colonies in the Caribbean
Yeah.
to buy Pennsylvania's grain. That was their number one export. And if those islands in the Caribbean had sunk beneath the waves like Atlantis mythically did, then Pennsylvania would have sunk right along with them, because it would have lost the number one market for its grain, and also the number one supplier for one of its biggest imports, which was molasses, which both Pennsylvanians and New Yorkers, especially New Englanders, turned into rum at great profit.
We have a little conspiracy theorist with us today, and he said that the bankers in New York ran the slave trade. But what would you care to comment again on this? Because of course we know.
I'm going to get up for 1 second to answer that question, because I have a book that answers that question. My friend Karen Murphy, who teaches.
Yeah, Carl, I don't think you're
at Providence
quite
College.
on point here.
I just got this book.
Sorry, buddy, but you know.
What's that? No, I don't have it. I don't have it close to hand, but there is a wonderful book called Banking on Slavery was big business, and everyone knows if you're going to start a business, you've got to borrow money. And so people would borrow money, use it to purchase slaves, and then the slaves were the collateral on those notes, and those notes circulated. You know, I own a house, but I don't really own it. I borrowed money from the bank, and I've got a mortgage piece of paper, but it was owned by one bank for like a week, and then they sold my mortgage to some other bank who sold it to some other bank, and so on and on. And slaves, the notes behind slaves were the same, and were traded much like stocks are traded today. So the beginnings of the financial sector in America really. The financial sector was essential to the growth of slavery, and I would say slavery was essential to the growth of the financial sector. Sharon Murphy, Banking on Slavery. I really recommend it. I was hoping I could hold up a copy. Let me go try to find it.
As bad as I am.
I bet there's something to say on this topic while I'm doing my search.
Oh goodness, yeah. I see we have Neo-Confederate on the line here.
Oh, do we?
I ran across the debate in history has been quite prominent here. The perspective that just can't seem to grasp the complexity of this mess. We look at slavery as being an either or thing, and it's far messier than that.
While we wait for Woody, why don't you tell us a little bit about this? Your thoughts on this, Thomas.
I repeat. Wait, I didn't catch everything you said there.
Why don't you tell us about what your thoughts on this while you're at it?
Again,
Tell us your comments on this while we wait for Woody.
Okay. When we're looking at this thing here, a lot of folks, too many, I believe, kind of ignore what the problems that slavery has brought into the founding. It's embedded in the legal structures. Willie and I were talking. What's your favorite historian? Mine was Edmund Morgan, who wrote a book about back in the 70s, American Freedom, American Slavery, and he's tracing the law codes in Virginia. Virginia being the prime state in the 1770s and 80s and 90s. It's the big state, and so a lot of the laws, a lot of the practices, economically, socially, come out of Virginia, or they're mimicked from Virginia. And he goes to great length on that one. And he goes every country. Yes, it's not.
Yeah, that's a great book. Morgan's is a wonderful book.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
I can't find it.
It's a Neo-Confederate. The issue of slavery is not there. It is. It's based in there. The politics, and it's baked into the early stuff. Early ages, and it's baked into law codes. It's baked in. By Lincoln's time, Lincoln himself said, "Yeah, this is it." Reading all the various, I don't think anybody historically minded who has the grasp of the readings of the past would argue slavery is not front and center in looking at our identity.
Well, and the Confederate leaders themselves said the cornerstone of the Confederacy
Alexander,
is
good old
slavery and white
Alexander
supremacy.
Stevens. Yeah, good old Alexander. Go to Alex. You know, the Nibbins, as Lincoln called them, the little Nibbins. But they had that intense of backdrop in slavery. They could not let it go. Let's see. My mind's run blank here. Joanne Friedman's book American Violence in Congress, or Field of Blood. Joanne Friedman's book on that. She goes to great lengths on dealing with the law code, dealing with the system of violence. I just about finished Wide Awakes, and we're looking at the Northerners rejecting the bullying, the Southern, the Democrats of the South in the 1850s had been promoted and pushing Congress, using the Electoral College in their way to manage to push their way, their acts through, or to shut up debate. People like John Quincy Adams went to great lengths to try and buck that system. And being the old politician, they couldn't really hurt him physically, but they would love to have done so. But this continued on through the 1850s until, I said, someone said they look at our own age as being way too similar to the 1850s. Not wanting to use the same language, but we have some of the same illiberal tendencies that are coming back into our own age. Something we don't.
Sorry if you're not a little distracted right now, but we have to get back to the current election. And so
what do
far,
we got?
And so far, Trump, from what I see, he seemed to be winning most states, and I think he has the electoral college as well.
Maryland, yeah.
But
okay, Maryland,
what do you have to go soon? But what are your thoughts on the election?
Wait,
the election so far.
On the vote, on the popular vote, just wait for California, and you have to wait 3 days because they let people mail in on Tuesday, and letters take till Saturday to arrive or whatever. But it just. Hold your horses. I don't promise that Harris is going to win.
So far, it's fairly close. CNN say
the southern states. For instance, Florida's very quick about counting, and I think they count quick on purpose to try to give a sense of momentum for their side. But we got a long way to go, and so I think it remains as unpredictable as ever.
Yeah, I think you're on that one.
How quickly did this change, though, from what we see right now until, let's say, tomorrow? Could we find out tonight who wins, or do we have to wait until the end of this week before it's? Because I believe
popular
last
vote
time
we won't know till Saturday. It'll be Saturday before we know who won the popular vote, because, as I said, if I remember this right, in California, I could have mailed in my ballot today. And so they won't even receive it until Thursday. It takes a couple days to count it. And that's obviously it's the largest state by population by far. And so the popular vote, we won't know who won the popular vote until Saturday.
So what we see now, because I'm sorry for interrupting you again, but what we've seen now is so far we know there was quite a lot of early voters in this year. Because but a lot of people don't want to bother with going on the election day because the queue will be horrendous. Is what we see now the early votes coming in? The first result is that the early votes. Thomas, you haven't spoken in a while, so what did you begin with? Is it the early vote we see right now on the election polls?
It's still and these are the ones that we're kind of you kind of expect them to be red. It's always depressing to look at because I think there was sometimes some elections back they were trying to get them to not say anything until California polls had closed,
right?
Because it felt like sometimes that they're trying to suppress the California vote, or California, Washington, and Oregon, basically, because those are 3 Democrat states with fairly good sized populations. So trying to develop that one, and I said it tends to depress an early turnout, and calling the elections and all. So it seemed like remember like even in the 90s that there was some debate on don't say just don't start the perhaps we're starting too early to saying anything.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and they've called elections before the polls closed, and people in Washington and Oregon and California reported the people lined up to vote. They just left the line and went home. Which was terrible because, of course, they often have Senate and governor's races and always have House races going on when there's a presidential race, and so yeah, they are showing more restraint, and they all did. I mean, there was a lot of polling of people coming out of the voting places, and they've done a very good job about not releasing those results until the polls closed in those particular states. But that's now coming out. Exit polls, they're called. And Erlend, you might want to look at some of the exit polls. That gives you some sense. That's part of the basis of my optimism was the early exit polls are showing such a large number of women voting. But we shall see. I do need to go. This has really been fun for me. And I had a look at the chat. That was interesting as well. Okay.
Thank you for sticking out with us, and it's been great fun. And you're always welcome back to the podcast anytime.
All right, man.
And I hope you listen to the live chat afterwards. Take care and enjoy the election night. Or should
I'm gonna have it in the background. Okay.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
All
right. Take care.
Later.
Bye bye.
We're gonna catch up here.
Bye.
Yeah.
And then there are fewer, and then that's so. It's a little bit concerning still, though. But Vermont, it seemed to be. I don't. You have CNN as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at Reuters here, or no, this is let's see, what is this?
So
one?
Virginia seems to be in favor so far of Harris, and with 52%.
New England, so New England coming through. So you got
Virginia and Massachusetts has
Connecticut, Vermont.
Yeah.
So there's a pickup. The big, like I said, the danger states, the one that Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio's still probably going to be more cautious because it's going to be a tight one there.
So what we're seeing so far is that most seem to be in favor of Trump. Of course, like you said, when I wake up tomorrow, my time, what do you think the result? Do you think it will be radically different from what we see now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think so. I think what will happen, though, is if California, Washington, Oregon take longer to do the final count, that might delay, because like I said, our practice has been kind of sit and watch through the night. But now, if it's a landslide, this is, I doubt this is going to be a Trump landslide. I really doubt that. But I really pray.
So far, what we see is the White House electors.
Trump remember, these are very small. These are not big. Florida's big, but Kentucky, West Virginia, these are not states of massive populations. They're not huge populations, and this is where I think the Electoral College is a deficit, because I think a lot of parts of Tennessee would vote Democrat. But the whole, all 11 votes go toward the one area. Same with Indiana. I mean, there should be a lot more delegates in the Electoral College so that those in urban areas actually get recognized better. And DC, I expect also it would be a solidly blue call as well.
So have we seen any violence so far? Because like we talked about earlier today, there was a lot of people that were boarding up and expecting violence tonight, and I haven't seen any reports about this yet. But it seemed to be, they were prepared for mobs to come out. So what were your thoughts on do you think, have you seen any sign of violence so far on the streets?
I look at the news here, and just kind of doing a quick check. Yeah, I mean, they were talking about it a lot, but I think the danger is going to come in afterwards. I think there is, because now here in Indy, the Indy news, everything seemed pretty quiet.
I had to kick your guy out because of getting way too radical. But he commented on how UK is locking people up on because of expressing the freedom of right. But we know from the news reports that that's not the case. They were attacking, and I had no time to comment this until now. But they were attacking innocent
Yeah.
immigrants, and they were attacking holy. They were terrorists by
Oh,
far. They
yeah,
were. They
yeah,
were
no,
locked up because they expressed their freedom of speech. They were locked up because they were
trying to kill.
attacking and
Yeah,
terrorizing minorities in the UK.
yeah.
That's why they were locked up, by
Well,
the
yeah,
way.
and
I'm
what
just
bothers me in particular,
commenting on a comment earlier that thought that commented how, oh, they were locked up because of freedom of speech. No, they were locked up because they spread lies,
yeah,
misinformation, and they
yeah,
were
yeah, they really
attacking
can't, yeah,
minorities who had
they
nothing to
really can't
do.
be on protection for lying.
Yeah.
We had the Haitian
They were
issue.
locked up because they were expressing their freedom of speech. Not
No,
you are allowed to protest, but when
yeah,
it comes to attacking private property and
yeah, they
attacking,
did. Yeah, went against
yeah,
people. Also the
but
lying in Springfield, Ohio, against the Haitians. That one was
yeah,
particularly onerous to me because here in Indy, um, we have a whole congregation of Haitians that are friends of our family. You know that said, dude, you are calling these folks this, and the thing is to accuse them of such something as sort of eating pets, and then to go on to say, to keep claiming it when you know that's not true. And the thing is, even if something was true, it says, then my argument goes, you've allowed people to become so hungry that they're eating pets. I said, shame on you then. Um, but the whole thing was mocked up and to insult these and endanger them, endanger the whole darn town.
yeah.
So yeah, I have very little. That one is infuriating to me, and there's no protection for that kind of speech.
What are your thoughts on the elections so far, from what we're seeing in the
I hate
different
look.
states?
It's stressful to me to look at the solid South still voting this way,
Mm,
still voting in illiberal. They're still. It's almost as if I'm still looking at the slaveholding South. I'm still looking at that kind of um, dominance, and because I guess because I've become disgusted with the Republicans as they have evolved. That one, it just bothered me a lot to see the policies and the attitudes that they have embraced. That just, I mean, we have to have two. We have to have more than one party. We've got to have two parties. But
So,
for pity's sake, guys, we
again,
got
to
to have,
interrupt you, sorry, I just had to comment on the result because apparently Oklahoma, Alabama has won Trump, and Massachusetts, sorry if I said that wrong, has been winner Kamala Harris, and
yes, yeah. So,
Maryland has been Kamala Harris,
yep.
and we
Because
see
it's
now
pretty
the
much,
District of Columbia has been
yeah.
Kamala
It gives
Harris.
her an estimated. They use it carefully. 35 electoral votes so far.
Yeah. So far Trump has 90 electoral votes, and what happens, because he's way in the lead as for now, it does
Right.
not look good for Kamala Harris.
No,
So how
but if you look at
essential are
but if you look
these?
at but look at the states. New York is not called yet, or New Jersey. Both those are large populations. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, and
Pennsylvania Harris is in the lead right now. I'm sorry for interrupting you again, but I
no,
just
yeah,
looked
please
at the
do.
result.
I can always see it. Yeah. Let's see. If I move back, if I moved another one of those.
North Carolina is Harris in the lead.
Yeah.
What is your states? What are your states again? Yeah, that's
I'm in
I keep
Indiana.
forgetting. Indiana. Have you seen the results from Indiana yet?
Yeah, it's they're calling it for Trump, but now here's I'm looking at, let's see, what's one, I'm looking at NBC here, and they're showing Atlanta, Columbus, the urban areas is going very blue. So it's hitting some areas, yeah,
New Hampshire is 55.7% so far.
yeah.
And Pennsylvania, Harris is 72% as well. but it still leads the electoral map. But again, this is just early results. So
Yeah.
how should the electoral map change radically, or do you think it's
Well,
Trump has
I
the
think what
majority
happens.
so
Well,
far?
the electoral maps are, because if they get enough of a call in, they're saying, okay, they're assuming if there's like 70, 80% are already counted, and it looks real strongly toward Trump, they'll call like for Indiana. The popular vote is not clear yet, but because of the Electoral College being so disturbingly archaic, it doesn't really break it down as I think it probably should.
Oh, New York seems to be Trump seems to actually be winning New York. He lost it I think he lost it the last two elections. But I don't know if this is New York. The cities looks the same to me, but or is it Michigan? I'm not sure
wait.
if it's.
Let's see. Let me look. Which station?
I don't know it looks like New York on the CNN, but there's one. I don't know if it's a total or yeah, this is the electoral map, but he's
BBC.
90. He's way ahead of Harris on the electoral map, so as far as we could just
Yeah.
see, and that
Well,
kind of
yeah.
concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, that is. But like I said, election night in the Bulwark. Let's see. Oh, they're talking. Oh, they're doing the same thing we are at the Bulwark. So,
Which news sites are you on? Because I'm using
I just
CNN.
went, let's
right
see.
now.
I just went ABC. I just went. Let's see. BBC,
We're still waiting for a result from Erlend.
NBC.
ABC, D, E, F, G, A,
Yeah, there we go.
ABC, D, E, F, G, L,
Yeah, the live ones. Trying to make sure that catch the live ones here.
QRC. Sorry about that. Yeah. Alabama, of course, that's kind of obvious, but Trump seems to be winning Alabama, and that kind of, yeah, that makes sense.
See,
Yeah.
it's 7, 8. See, they've got another 2 hours before California is going to close.
But so far, it seemed to be quite even in the popular votes so far, but Trump, yeah, it's the electoral college map that worries.
Well, I remember somebody said because the Red
I'm
Mirage.
repeating myself.
Yeah, something called the Red Mirage is that you'll see you'll see a very strong element of the Republicans leading off first, and then bit by bit it'll be eaten away as the larger states begin to. Let's see, where is one here?
Let's talk about something that we haven't talked about so far, and you already, of course, know this way better than I do. But that is something.
How long do you want to keep this going?
We can turn it another 30 minutes. I think. How much
Okay.
do you want to keep? It depends on you. How much further do you
Well,
want
I
to
said
keep
I
this?
can't too much long. I haven't had supper yet.
Yeah. Okay, we can leave soon. We can take 2.5 hours, maybe.
Yeah.
10 more minutes if
All right.
if you
How
want
do you
to.
want
Yeah.
it?
So I want
Okay.
to end by talking
Popular
about
votes. Here we go. Okay, look, North Carolina looks like it's going Democrat for the governor's race. Oh crap! Republican won Indiana again. Doggone it!
So let's talk a little bit about some of the swing states, because Florida, I believe, is a swing state, but it's
Yeah,
also they
it's
seem
going
to be
red. The Senate went
very
red.
pro-Trump. But what about the rest of the swing state? What do you think we will see there on the rest of the swing state this year?
I'm getting different numbers here. So that's it. The different newscasters are not calling it yet for some areas here. The county runs 14 million to 12 million
Kansas,
right now.
actually, it's quite interesting. I thought Kansas would be kind of, but Kamala Harris seemed to be more pro. Kansas seemed to be very Democrat so far as the first 2 hours, first hour of the election.
Senate looks like it gained a seat. So I hope not. Although in 2 years, the Democrats will be in big trouble because they could really lose a lot.
Well, I want to take take us to a different universe. And say if Biden has still been running for president in an alternative universe, how different do you think the results we have seen so far would have been? It would been if he was still running.
I think Harris given it was a much stronger candidate than Biden. Although there's also, and the good news is that if there is violence before inauguration, with Biden as president, he is not limited in what basically he's going to have the ability to actually act against. He will not be like Trump. He will act against the rioters and attackers, and it doesn't have to be, because if he's running for president and he's having to use the power of president, that's an awkward moment.
Yeah,
that's a very awkward thing to do. Whereas now he is not running for president, but he uses his power as president to protect the election. And so, if it comes down to it, he has the ability to do it better than Harris than if he was actually running for president.
So I think we're gonna. It will be interesting. In the next few days, I will be constantly updating. Thank you for everyone who tuned in, who left a comment. Thank you to most people. And yeah, if you enjoyed this live stream, I think we're gonna end it there because you gotta eat as well. I hope I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream. We will take a little historical aspect out of it. I think this a lot of things relies.
3 historians out here tonight.
Yeah. So, how do you think the next? I'm gonna ask one last question before we go.
All right.
And what do you think we will see in the next few days?
Pain and suffering. What's going to happen is that probably in the morning, depending how close it is, if it remains squeaker close, there'll be a lot of resistance to calling it. Trump will try and call it tonight. He will try and make a call tonight, and but we've all been warned about it. I mean, it's gone across the news as ignore anything that calls tonight because too many states are going to have to take an extra day or two to do the votes. By no means should it be a landslide. We're just too divided in that area.
I kind of got to go right now, but I want to ask should we be looking at the popular vote or the electoral map as what's the most important there?
Well, the electoral vote's the most important one because that's what actually elects the president. And we have to follow the electoral college, not the popular vote. But it does begin, but each time we have an election where the electoral vote is vastly different from the popular vote, there is more of a crisis move to remove or do something about the electoral college because realize that is not entirely honest and that we need to do something about that.
I think we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me the last 2.5 hours. It's been a great pleasure. This will be a long and painful week.
Yeah, it will be.
I can't say I'm really looking forward to it, but we'll see so far. This has been with that. I should like, share, and subscribe. And of course, stay tuned for more live streams. We will hopefully know the result by the end of this week. And I'm super excited. And I don't let you go now, Thomas. So thank you again for coming.
Hey.
This has been with that way. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, podcast, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts these days. Check out some of the episodes we made; they are amazing. Thomas has of course been on several of those. And thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye. There you go. What do you think? Whew.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, but if